This story was sent to me by a follower from New Orleans, and she swears that she's never told anybody about this because she knows how insane that it will sound. Now, there's no way for me to prove any of this, so as always, this story is for entertainment purposes only. Now, a few months ago, she was leaving a friend's apartment in the French Quarter, and it was a little bit after 11:30, close to midnight, and she had a drink or two, but she wasn't drunk. She just remembers every detail of that night extremely vividly, and now that comes in for later on. So she ordered an Uber ride home, and the driver accepted almost immediately. When he pulled up, she said something felt off right away. Not like she was in any danger, but just something felt weird. The inside of the car was extremely dark, unusually dark. He didn't even have tints. The dashboard lights were dimmed almost completely, and the driver never turned around when she got in. He just quietly asked her, "Mitch?" And she corrected him and gave her actual name. And there was a strange pause, and then he just simply said, "Right," and proceeded to drive. Now, the ride started normal enough, but the streets were mostly empty, and the driver didn't say another word. About 10 minutes into the trip, she happened to glance at the rear view mirror, and at first she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, or maybe she was a little drunk, and the reflection didn't seem to match what she was actually seeing. The back of the driver's head looked completely normal, but in the mirror, something about his face seemed different, we'll say. His cheekbones looked higher, his skin looked tighter, and his eyes appeared slightly farther apart than they normally would have been, or they should have been. And she said that she blinked really hard to try to fix her eyesight and look away, but when she looked back, everything appeared normal. And she laughed it off and told herself that she was tired. It was the lighting, it was the dark, and she was drunk maybe. But then it happened again. And this time she watched for a little bit longer. And for less than a second, the reflection changed in the mirror. And she said it looked like his face was shifting beneath his skin. Like it was like shifting. And not transforming dramatically, not like any of that movie stuff. More like another face underneath was trying to push its way through to the surface. And his nose seemed flatter, his eyes seemed to appear much darker and wider like the first time, and the skin around his temples looked stretched, she said. And for a split second, she could have sworn that the texture of his skin looked almost like scaled or like scaly, like fish, reptilian-like, and then it was gone, back to normal again. And she immediately looked away. Her heart was pounding now because she's like, oh my God, I really am seeing what I'm seeing. She checked the Uber profile on her phone, and the photo matched the driver, at least for the most part. She could tell that it was actually him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the face that she'd just seen in the mirror was not human. She knew that for a fact. And the rest of the ride home was completely silent. She kept staring out the window. She kept her hand on the door and trying to convince herself that she maybe imagined it. Then, just before they reached her apartment, she accidentally looked into the mirror one last time. And that's when she saw it more clearly this time. For that moment, the driver's reflection wasn't the face of the man. The eyes looked much larger, the pupils appeared unnaturally dark, the jaw looked broader, and the skin had a faint texture to it, almost like reptile skin when you look at it beneath the water, like that shimmering effect. And not enough to be certain, but just enough to make her stomach drop and realize, like, I actually am seeing this. And then it vanished. Now, the driver never reacted to it. He never blinked, never looked at her in any way. And when he finally pulled up to her building, she grabbed her bag and got out as quickly as she could. And she just said thank you and was on her way out. And as she was closing the door, the driver spoke for the first time in nearly 20 minutes. Without turning around, just hand on the steering wheel, looked forward, and he just said, "Most people never notice." And she froze on the spot. Before she could respond, he just pulled away. That was it. So the next morning, she opened up the Uber app, intending to, maybe report the experience, that it was a little uncomfortable. The trip was there, the charge was there, but the driver's profile was gone. There was no photo of him, no name, nothing. She contacted the customer support line and thinking that maybe it was some kind of technical issue, but they confirmed that the ride did in fact happen, but told her the driver was no longer active and they couldn't provide any other information on that matter. So to this day, she doesn't know what she saw in that mirror. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe a trick of the lighting, or maybe just for a few seconds on a dark New Orleans street, she saw what was really sitting behind that wheel. And whatever it was, I don't think it was entirely human. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
What would you do if you heard something in your closet at night talking about something that nobody should know? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about someone who says that something in her closet remembered exactly what she tried to forget. When I was 9, I found a dead bunny behind my mom's shed. I need to start there because that's the part I never told anyone. It was summer. I was in my backyard by myself, and I found it half hidden in the weeds near the fence. It looked fresh enough that it still upset me. I remember crying, getting a little shovel from the garage, and burying it behind the shed because I thought that was kinder than leaving it out there. I didn't tell my mom, and I don't know why. I think because I was little and it felt like something sad that belonged to me once I found it. I buried it badly, covered the dirt with flowers I pulled up from the side of the house, and after a while I stopped thinking about it. Or at least I thought I did. A few months ago, I started hearing things in my closet. At first, it was so small I kept brushing it off. A little sound after midnight, or a shift, or a soft bump, like something light moving around in there. Or at least I thought I did. Now it's been so many years later, but a few months ago, I started hearing things in my closet. At first, it was so small I kept brushing it off. It was a little sound after midnight, and then a shift, a soft bump, and like something light moving around in there. I live alone, so I checked it immediately the first time, but there was nothing. Then it started sounding like something hopping. That is exactly what it sounded like, soft little thumps across the carpet near the foot of my bed. And then 2 more, like a rabbit moving through the dark. And the first time I heard it, I turned my lamp on so fast, I knocked my water over. But there was nothing in the room. There wasn't an animal or an open window. No explanation. A few nights later, I woke up because I heard crying. Very soft and coming from inside the closet. Not loud and not human exactly, more like small, hurt little crying. Weak, the kind that makes you think of something trapped or injured. I sat there in bed staring at the closet door, waiting for it to stop, but it didn't. And then the crying cut off and something whispered my name. I don't mean I thought I heard it. I definitely heard it. Right from inside the closet. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight on and aimed it at the door. The closet was cracked open. I know I had shut it before bed, and there was dirt on the carpet in front of it. Just a little at first, small dark pieces scattered near the door seam. And then the voice said, "You didn't dig deep enough." I couldn't breathe for a second. I just sat there staring at the gap in the door with my phone shaking in my hand. And then the crying started again. The same small and weak, fake sad cry, like whatever was in there wanted me to remember how pathetic it had sounded when it died. I got out of bed, backed all the way to my bedroom door, and kept the light on in the closet. That was when I saw it. Not fully, but just enough. A tall black shape standing behind the crack in the door. And lower in the dark were 2 red glowing eyes. Not bright, and they were looking at me without blinking. And then it said, I remember the dirt in my mouth. I ran out of the room and I slept on the couch with the TV on until morning. And the next day I told myself I was exhausted, that I was dragging up some old memory and turning it into a nightmare because I was stressed. And then that night I heard the hopping again, soft little thumps around the room. I turned on the lamp, but there was nothing. And then from the inside of the closet, something started making that same weak crying sound again. And in between the little whimpers, I heard it whisper, "Do you want to hear how I sounded under the dirt?" I moved out 2 weeks later, and I haven't gone back for anything except the absolute basics. And I still have not opened that closet again. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
This lady says that her granddaughter discovered something and you are not going to believe what. So the granddaughter was actually in the garden playing, and that's when she pulled something out of a plant that looked like a little cloth bag. Inside of the bag was pictures of the entire family, her kids, her husband, even her dad. She immediately knew that it was brujeria and somebody was doing it to her family. Her father is 90 years old and he always told her that the house that they were living in was gonna belong to her. She had been living in that house for 20 years and also taking care of her father. Now, even though the father had always told her just like verbally that the house was going to belong to her, he recently actually made it legal and they signed all the paperwork. Now, her sister that is 65 years old always wanted that house because she wanted to leave that house to her kids. She explained how her sister's son did own his own home, but then he became an addict, ended up selling it, and now he is renting from place to place. And ever since that happened, her sister has been wanting the dad's house, which now is her house. She started to feel weird to the point where she couldn't sleep anymore, and when she did, she would have nightmares that she was in that house and she couldn't find her way out. Because of these dreams, she was actually getting really scared of living in that house, and she always felt like something was observing her. All of her plants would start to die, and she said that even her pets started dying as well. After living there for 20 years, her house even got infested by rats. The place where her granddaughter found that work was in one of the plants that had been the oldest plants that was there at the house. Inside of that little bag wasn't just pictures of them, there were actually some hair and then writings of their names but in reverse, and some rocks were in there as well. She ends up taking the work to one of her friends who knew about this, and the friends end up telling her that her sister was trying to get her out of that house. Now, unfortunately, her granddaughter did get really bad because she was the one who touched the work, and she started to see things in the bedroom. She wouldn't stop crying at night, and she would say that there was a lady calling to her in her room. The little girl was losing weight, she couldn't sleep, so she had really bad underbags, and obviously because of this, so did her daughter, the girl's mom, because she would stay up with her every night. This didn't end until they took the little girl to go and get a cleaning as well. She explains how her dad did find out about everything that happened, and he got really sad, but he wasn't surprised that his daughter did this to them. They did confront the sister and she denied everything, but she still ended up with nothing. She explains how people being envious of you is fucking scary, but it's even worse when it's coming from your own family. She says that now her sister and the kids, they're just not doing well, and obviously that doesn't make her happy, but like she knew her sister was doing this shit to her. That shit is nasty, like especially coming from your fucking sister. What the fuck is wrong with people? Anyway, what do you guys think?
I saw the same man smiling at me in 4 different countries, and every time a local saw him, they behaved in the exact same way, by freaking out and asking me why the devil was following me. This is JJ's submission to Spooky Scary Storytime, and she says this happened in 2001 when she was going on a cruise to 9 different countries with her mother and then another mother and daughter who they were family friends with. And this was shortly after 9/11, so she was reeling from the collective grief of the nation, as well as dealing with her own emotional trauma after going through a horrible breakup shortly before they left for the cruise. So she was excited to just get away for a little while. But the beginning of the trip was a little bit of a mess because in addition to the high security protocols that the airports had put into place since 9/11 happened, Florida was also dealing with a hurricane. And so after they arrived in Florida to board the cruise, they had some issues boarding the boat because you can't board a boat in 110-mile-an-hour winds. And so everybody that was going to be on the cruise was instructed to stay the night at a hotel while the cruise ship figured out if they were actually going to embark on their trip. JJ says she only mentions this so you can understand how many of the cruise's passengers that she was exposed to before even boarding the ship. And she says that both she and her mother are the types of people to make friends anywhere they go, and this trip was no different. And so by the time they actually boarded the boat, they had made several friends, including both passengers of the ship and the cruise's staff, which she was grateful for because most of the staff was around her age, while most of the cruise passengers were a little bit older. After boarding the boat, the first day they spent at sea, and the second day they were docked in Mexico, and there was an excursion off the boat to explore some of the ruins along the coast. Typically, the way that cruises work is the boat will dock and then everybody gets off who wants to leave. You don't have to leave the boat, but if you want to leave, you leave the boat early in the morning, spend the day at the destination country, and then you get back on the boat at night. JJ ends up disembarking the boat in Mexico, and she ends up getting on a chartered bus to go explore the ruins with some of the other cruise passengers and some of the local guides. JJ was the only one on the bus that spoke Spanish, and so the local guides moved her up to the front of the bus and they were chatting while the rest of the passengers were in back kind of sightseeing. And she expressed that she was very interested in finding real Mayan silver, and so after letting some of the other passengers off the bus, they took her to what appeared to be like a subterranean farmer's market. They brought her to a vendor in which she purchased a necklace, and the guides were sort of hanging out with her while everybody else was sightseeing. And she said after she purchased her necklace, they were headed back to the bus, and they were just kind of hanging out against a wall, eating some snacks, standing in the shade next to a big planter box with some large plants. And she said she was just chatting, having a good time, when all of a sudden she felt the sensation of someone looking at her. And so she turned to her left, and through the plant she can see a man who's staring straight through the plant at her and smiling. His sudden appearance startled her, and she found him to be a little bit jarring. She jumped back a little bit, and she said that he just appeared to be very dirty and gnarled looking. He had matte black hair that was slicked back and black eyes, not dark brown. They were black, and she said even the whites of his eyes seemed to have smoke across them. There was no shine to his skin, hair, or eyes, but his smile was what really did it, because she said it was just creep-tastic, as she described it. She said it was jarring, and it was menacing and violent, almost sardonically laughing at you with venom and spite. And his teeth were either missing or chipped and broken. She said it appeared that he had eaten granite for breakfast, and he wasn't doing anything besides smiling at her through the plant. And so she immediately looked at the guides, and as soon as they caught sight of him, they all began to panic. Two of the male guides that she was with crossed themselves, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and grabbed her by the arms and dragged her back to the bus. And then they yelled at the bus driver to go now. And the bus driver was also alarmed, even though he had no idea what was going on, and he peeled out of there. He drove about a block away and then pulled over and started yelling at the guides, saying he's not supposed to do that, and they left everybody else at the market, and that was a big no-no. And meanwhile, the guides are chaotic, and one of them is still crossing himself, and the other is asking her if she's been cursed. Bus driver is still yelling, trying to figure out what's going on. And finally she just says, there was just a man in a plant, and he was smiling at me, and he looked dirty. And at this point she thought that the guides knew this man and that he must have been dangerous. Nobody would give her any explanation for what she had just experienced, but she thought maybe it had something to do with their contracts and them not wanting to scare tourists. And so after a few minutes they headed back to where they had been parked before, but the man in the plant was gone. They told her to stay on the bus for the remainder of the day's excursions, while the rest of the tourists were able to walk around and meander as they wished. And she said that even though she didn't know why they were keeping her on the bus, she assumed that they knew better than she did. And if they said something was dangerous or they told her to run, she would run, because they must have known something that she didn't. The next day, the excursion was in Panama, but she wasn't feeling well, and she didn't want to get off the boat to go on the excursion. It was very humid in addition, and she was just nauseated. And so she told her mom and the family friends to go ahead while she sat on the ship's dock and watched them disembark. And she said that she was just sitting there, and she could see them in the corral where they kind of check you before you're able to cross into the next country. She had full view of the port, and she was watching everybody go through the checkpoint and get patted down by the armed guards. And as she's watching this, she kind of scans further to the left to the port town itself, and through the crowd she can see the same man standing on the street staring directly at her. She said it was as if the world got smaller and he got larger, and all she could make out was that same vile sneer. She immediately jumped up and ran inside and did not see him again that day, but she said now she had seen him 2 times in 2 different countries, and she hadn't assumed that he was a passenger of the boat because at the time the boat still had a dress code. It was also too early in the day for him to have somehow gotten off the boat and through the checkpoint and ended up on the street, because when she saw him, they had just started letting the cruise ship passengers through the checkpoint. She said he appeared to be a vagrant, but seeing him in 2 different countries had her confused. But regardless, she was sick throughout the remainder of the day and waited in bed for her mom to return. A few days passed, and the cruise visited a few more countries where she disembarked and did not see the man. So she started thinking that this was a fluke, and that it just happened to be 2 different men who looked similar, that she somehow took to be the same man, and freaked out for no reason. So she was like, I'm in the clear. But then the cruise docks in Colombia, and she was actually really excited for Colombia because she said at the time Shakira had just released a new album and nobody in the US had it, and she's a huge Shakira fan. And so when they get to Colombia, she asks where she can go buy the CD, and someone gives her directions to a local record store. As soon as she got off the boat, she ran through the town to the town square, which was still pretty empty considering it was very early in the day, and she found the record shop, and the store owner let her in. She asked him, hey, do you have the Shakira CD? And he says, I have one left. And she was on cloud 9. She says, if anyone remembers buying CDs and how exciting it was to get your hands on something that you had been waiting for, that was the feeling. And so she ends up chatting with the store owner for a little bit after buying the CD, and he tells her about a local bakery where she can get some really great pastries. And after chatting for a bit, she heads off from the record store with the CD in hand to the pastry that he recommended. And at this point, there were only a few people in the town square, and it was mostly shop owners getting to work. And she spots the bakery, and she's head there, and in the middle of the square was a small fountain. She said it was small enough that you could see past it, but as she's passing the fountain, The smiling man steps out from behind it. She said there was no way that he could have been hiding behind it. I would have seen him. The square was empty, but he stepped out and he had the same menacing grin. She said, I froze, my blood went cold, and then I heard the record store shop owner yelling behind me. So I turned around and I ran like an Olympic athlete, and he was motioning for me to come back in the store, and he was like, hurry, hurry. She made it into the store, and the store owner quickly locked the door behind her and looked out into the square, and she peeked over his shoulder, but the smiling man was gone. And then he turned to her, he crossed himself, and he said, why is the devil following you? She said, this is the third time I've seen him, and he appeared very worried. He was staring out into the square, waiting for this man to materialize, but they did not see him again. And he told her, in good faith, I cannot let you leave right now. And so she waited there for a little while, and after a little bit, when he was sure that it was safe, he unlocked the door and let her out. But then he put up a close sign and kept the shop closed as she headed back to the port. Though there were other things she wanted to do in Colombia, she said she was too scared, and so she went back to the port and hung out near where the military was stationed up by the checkpoint and waited for her mom and friends to return at the end of the day. Cruise had a few days at sea, and then they stopped at a private island exclusively for the cruise ship passengers, and they let everyone disembark who wanted to for a small chartered bus tour to see the island. After the third stop, JJ says she was extremely hot and extremely tired, and she asked the bus driver if she could just stay on the bus and sit in the AC and chat with her. And she said the bus driver was this like 50-year-old island woman. She was lovely, and she said, yeah, baby, come on, sit up front, sit in the AC with me, we'll have a good time. She said she appeared to be very no-nonsense, very tough, but also very gentle in a specific way, and she said she absolutely loved this woman. She said sitting with her in the AC, she felt protected and blessed and was just grateful to be able to sit in the air conditioning and chit-chat without having to be fake or put on pleasantries. Interestingly enough, she says where they were stopped was at a place that's named Hell, and it's named that for the rock formations, but JJ had zero interest in getting off the bus because you could see the rock formations from the window of the bus. At this point, everybody else on the bus had gotten off, and she says that it was just her and the bus driver, and they were just sitting and talking, and she felt her elbow accidentally hit the button to roll down the window. And so as she glanced over the window to roll the window back up, she caught sight of a man standing out her window, and you guessed it, it was the same man. As she caught sight of him, she heard the bus driver scream and say, oh no, and then she started praying and drove the bus over the concrete divider where they were parked to get away from this man. She said this woman pushed this pedal to the metal. She was flying out of there, and she drove them directly to a church where she parked directly outside the front doors. And then she looked at JJ and she said, I have seen a lot of things, child, but I don't know why the devil was just stalking you at the bus's window. And she stared at her and she said, okay, come on, we're going in the church. And she grabbed her by the wrist, yanked her out of the bus, and pulled her inside, where she doused her with holy water. No one else was in the church, but they sat there until it was time to pick up the remainder of the cruise ship guests, and they headed back to the parking lot where they had been parked before. As everyone came back to the bus driver stood outside, ushering everyone in as fast as she possibly could. And then when JJ got back on the boat, she yelled at her behind her to be careful. And JJ says, needless to say, she was very spooked by all of this, and that says something, because she's not usually the type to scream and cry about something that she doesn't necessarily believe is out there. She said she is a pretty tough person. She said she has been through a lot, both physically and spiritually, but something about this was very worrisome to her because it had happened 4 different times in 4 different countries. And she says, interestingly, when they returned home from that trip, that very night, she got some news that flipped her world upside down, and it began a very dark spiral in her life. She was in a very dark place for a very long time, but she says in that dark place is when you're able to learn about the light in yourself. And she eventually did and rose from the ashes. She says in retrospect, she believed she was being warned about what was coming. She remembered his vile smile, and it seemed like he was taking joy in the suffering that he knew was coming. She said on her darkest days, she would remember him and his smile and refuse to let him win. She said, I was trying to survive one day at a time to spite his evil ass. I ended her email by saying, telling the story makes her feel vulnerable, and there's a reason she's never told this publicly before, but she said she wanted to thank this community for allowing her to have a place to share something like this and for giving her a place to be believed. She says she finds it cathartic. She mentioned that she didn't care to be tagged, but JJ is her real name, so let her know if you have thoughts, and if you have a spooky scary story time you think nobody would believe, send it in. We would love to hear it. Chances of you coming face to face with a serial killer are probably higher than most people would be comfortable with. The FBI estimates that there's between 25 and 50 active serial killers in the United States at any given time, and the average person is expected to cross paths with a murderer at least 36 times in their life, though the chance of them being a serial killer is a little bit lower. While true crime is not usually my thing, I did receive a story submission from someone named Tammy who shared her experience coming face to face with a serial killer when she was 8 years old in October of 1972. She grew up on her father's family farm. It was about 100 acres, and there were a ton of animals. She had just learned to ride her bicycle without the training wheels, and while she was allowed to ride wherever she wanted on the property, she really wanted access to the road. So her mother allowed her to ride up and down the road about a football field's length away before turning around at the end of the road and coming back. And her father absolutely hated this. He said, "You have 100 acres to play on. Why do you need to play in the road?" But he begrudgingly allowed it with the condition that their family dog went along with Tammy. Tammy's dog, lovingly named Fatso because he was the fattest puppy in his litter, was 4 years old, and he was a cross between a German Shepherd and a Black Lab. One evening, as Tammy practiced riding her bike up the road, a green car pulled over next to her, and a man got out and asked if she knew how to get to Pleasant Lake, which is a lake in New York State. And she had heard of the lake, but she didn't know how to get there, and so she said, "I don't know, you should ask my daddy." The man got out of his car and began to approach Tammy, but he made the mistake of getting between Fatso and Tammy, and Fatso attacked. And panicked, Tammy dropped her bike and ran home and told her dad everything that happened. Later, Fatso appeared back at the farm, and he was covered in blood, but her dad cleaned him up and he had no injuries. The blood wasn't his. Tammy went to bed that night, still shaken up by what had happened, but she was woken up later by her father with the New York State Police behind him about a man who had gone to the emergency room with dog bite injuries. Her father told Tammy to tell the police everything that she had told him, but she was extremely afraid. She was worried that they were going to take Fatso away because he had injured the man. But reluctantly, she did tell the officers the truth, and the officers assured her that she was very brave for telling them the truth, and they assured her that they were not going to take her dog away because he had been protecting her. They also told her that the bad man had been arrested. At the time, she says she didn't know what that meant, besides the fact that he couldn't show up and scare her anymore. Tammy was allowed to keep Fatso, and he never left her side anytime she played outside. And the incident sort of faded into the background, and Fatso eventually passed away at 15 years old. But when Tammy was 35 years old, after her father passed, she found out that the man her dog had bit was Arthur Shawcross. He had taken the lives of 4-year-old Karen Ann Hill and Jack Blake Owens in September and October of 1972. And when he was arrested on October 3rd, 1972, on the front page news, you can see the bandages from the dog attack hanging out from beneath his pant leg. Fatso had literally saved Tammy's life because Arthur Shawcross had just committed these horrific crimes, and he was eventually convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison, but was let out after 14 years for good behavior. But when he got out, he immediately went on another spree. He then took the lives of 14 women and became known as the Genesee River Killer in Rochester, New York. And he later said in interviews that he switched from children to women because everyone looks for children, but women on the streets are seldom looked for. Tammy said it was fine to use her real name in sharing her experience, and she says she does have an interest in true crime because of her experience. She said she's always had this incessant need to understand the motives of why these people do what they do, but the one thing that she understands after watching countless documentaries and reading FBI profiles is that it doesn't have to make sense, because it only makes sense in their mind as they're doing it. You will be seeing the comments, and if you have a spooky scary storytime submission, one that you think no one will believe or one that you just want to get off your chest, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
So whenever I read a story about a cabin in the woods, especially one in the Appalachian Mountains, I just know it's going to be a scary story. And in tonight's story, that's where it happened. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story comes from Haley. Hi there, my name is Haley, and I would like to start this story off by saying that I am a firm believer in Jesus Christ and that He is my Savior. Having said that, this story is 100% true, hand on the Bible. A couple of years ago, my girlfriend, now wife Ashley, and I stupidly bought a timeshare. We were young and dumb with a little bit of expendable money and thought, why not? Our timeshare was located in Chicago, but we were tired of visiting there. So we looked and saw that there were some cabins in Tennessee. The pictures of the cabin were beautiful, and the thing that sold me was it's very modern looking and fancier than our house. We live in Michigan, and when we drove down, it was about a 10-hour drive. We were exhausted and arrived at the cabin around dinner time. It was essentially a neighborhood that circled all the way around and up a mountain with a bunch of other cabins. When we pulled in, we sat there just excited to finally be there, not excited to lug all of our stuff in. We both grabbed a couple of bags and made our way inside. I am not clairvoyant or psychic, but as soon as that front door opened and I took one step inside, it felt heavy. It felt very heavy and strange, and I had this overwhelming feeling of dread. I didn't mention this to Ashley, as she had a huge smile on her face and didn't seem to feel what I did. I tried to shrug it off and kept it to myself and succeeded for a little while. We were scheduled to be there a total of a week, so I just knew this was going to be the longest week of my life. The first night was spooky. Nothing in particular happened, but I did feel eyes on me and just a very heavy presence. Every time I woke up in the night, there was never an adjustment period of dreaming to reality. It hit me the second I opened my eyes that something was off. The next day, I got ready as fast as I could so we could leave and explore Tennessee. I tried my damnedest to stay out as late as we possibly could without alerting Ashley that something was wrong. After all, nothing had happened, so I couldn't really explain it. The bedroom was located upstairs in the loft area, so that's where we spent most of our time if we were there. The bathroom and kitchen were downstairs. Anytime I needed to go into another room by myself, the feeling got more intense every single time I did. Like, not only were there eyes on me, but they were also only about a foot behind me. Something deep in my gut was telling me not to look into a mirror or anything reflective, so I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't, because I know deep in my heart that I would have seen something that I would never forget. To this day, I don't look in the mirror for too long. There was also this coat closet that was located right in front of the main door, so as soon as you opened the front door, that was the first thing you saw. I just knew that something was not right about it. It's not something that I can explain to have you fully understand, but I felt that there was something in it. So every time I needed to go by it, I ran. I did everything I could not to look at it or give it really any time of day. At this point, I was following Ashley around the cabin and wouldn't go into a room by myself. Ashley knew something was up with me, and I decided to tell her, but not everything. Just that I felt uncomfortable. She said that she was feeling a little strange too, but never really give it any thought. There was this one instance when I went into the restroom downstairs and obviously kept the door open. I kept looking straight at the wall in front of me because I didn't know how, but I knew there was something above me. I could literally pinpoint exactly where this thing was. It was above me in the corner, watching me. I did my business and couldn't help but run out of there and get back to Ashley. Eventually, the closet was on my mind constantly, so I decided that if I just opened it and saw that nothing was there, it would ease my anxiety and maybe allow me to enjoy the rest of the trip. I prayed for courage and protection and decided to, very stupidly I know, just go open it. I walked downstairs and stared at it for what felt like hours. I finally gained the courage to open it and saw nothing but a couple of hangers and a vacuum, but also felt like I was intruding. Like now I had cornered those eyes that were following me. I couldn't see anything or anyone, but I felt it. I felt exactly where they were standing and felt like I had locked eyes with them. I felt like by opening the door, I opened something more. Like I gave permission for something without saying anything. I closed the door and prayed again. Later that night, Ashley decided to go to bed, and I just felt the ultimate dread. I didn't want to. I didn't want to turn off the lights or get under the covers, and I didn't want to lay down. I really didn't want it to be night. But I did, though. I turned on Family Guy and just tried to focus on that. Somehow, even with eyes on me, I fell asleep. I had a dream that I will remember for the rest of my life, and if you're interested in that, let me know, and I can share it with you. That dream belongs in hell, and it can stay there. Family Guy had been turned off, and I was in complete darkness and silence. I woke up not being able to move. It was not sleep paralysis, it was just plain shock and fear. And those eyes never left me. I know Ashley would never turn it off because Family Guy is like a comfort blanket for me. For the rest of the night, I laid there, stiff and quiet, until eventually the sun came up. I mentioned none of this to Ashley, only that I had a rough night and a bad dream. We left for the day, and when we came back, we decided we were going to use the jacuzzi that was upstairs near our bed. We hadn't used it yet, and our trip was soon coming to an end. There was a hot tub outside on the porch, but it is important to note that the porch was literally on the edge of a cliff. Not a huge cliff, but still. And the entire porch was wrapped in this chicken wire fencing material, presumably so people didn't fall. So there was absolutely no way onto the back porch without walking through the front door to get to the back door. We got into the jacuzzi that was inside, and finally, I couldn't take it anymore and decided to tell her everything. From the eyes to the closet. That's when she looked at me with the most serious look and said, "Maybe we shouldn't talk about this here." And before I could react or say anything, we heard the doorknob on the back door that leads to the fenced-in porch jiggle. We looked at each other in complete silence, eyes wide, but did not dare to move. The jiggling got louder and louder and louder until finally it stopped. Only a few seconds later, there was a loud bang on the back door, like someone or something wanted in now. Our fight or flight kicked in simultaneously, and we were out of that jacuzzi and dressed only a few moments later. We looked at each other and said, "F this," and we packed our stuff, not caring what we left behind. At midnight, we packed all of our stuff into our car and headed back home to Michigan. In the car, we finally unloaded what we endured that week, and Ashley revealed that she was also having nightmares, but didn't want to frighten me. She didn't quite feel everything I did, but agreed that something was off. 9 to 10 hours later, we returned home and didn't even bother to bring in the bags. We went straight to our bedroom and went to sleep. As I was about to fall asleep, I heard footsteps pacing around the perimeter of our bed, just back and forth. My head was under the covers and I didn't dare look, so I stayed there until I fell asleep. When we both woke up later that day, I asked her if she heard the footsteps too, and her face went white as a ghost, and she said, "I was hoping I had dreamt that." Ever since then, we have had some very strange occurrences in our house, and I'd love to share them with you if you're interested. So I did reach out to Haley, and they ended up sending me the rest of their story. I do want to say that the dream that they had inside the cabin is a little bit too graphic for TikTok, so I won't be able to share that here, but I am going to share with you what they've been experiencing since they got home from that cabin. Just last night, my dresser tipped over in the middle of the night. Not the first time that this has happened. Lights go on and off, and things go missing. We hear walking on whatever floor we are not on. Things also crash on the floor in rooms we are not in, like big booms of things falling, and when we go check, nothing is out of place. One night, we fell asleep to Family Guy on Hulu, but we woke up to a scary clown movie on Netflix. But it was frozen to a still image of a clown. At the time, we had just moved our bedroom upstairs, so we only had a laptop on a nightstand for the TV. There's no way we could have rolled onto the remote and changed the platform and put on a movie. Another night we slept up there, there is a room right on the other side of where we were sleeping with a recliner chair in it. It sounded like someone was rocking in it. It kept hitting the wall. When we went in, not only was it empty, but it wasn't even close enough to hit the wall if someone were rocking in it. All of our animals will randomly stare in a random corner of our house for way too long. Ashley is heard whispering in her ear at night as she's about to go to sleep. A couple of weeks ago, we heard our basement door handle rattle, and when we walked towards it, we heard running down the steps. When you first go into any room, it feels like you are being watched. Haley, I don't want to scare you, but I really feel like you guys brought something home from that cabin in Tennessee. Because if before you went to the cabin, you guys hadn't had any experiences like that, but now that you're back, you're having experiences in your home like you did when you were in the cabin. That is absolutely terrifying, and I hate that you guys are going through that. But as you said in the beginning, you are a believer in Jesus Christ. I am as well, and I truly believe in the power of prayer. So I would recommend that you guys pray over yourselves, pray over your home, pray over your space, because it just feels like something has followed you guys home, and that is absolutely terrifying. But I myself will be praying as well, because I couldn't imagine going through this, and I'm so sorry y'all have been going through it. But I didn't even get to read to you guys the dream that they had. But just take my word for it. It is absolutely sick. It is a very scary and intense dream. And there's things in it that I can't say here on TikTok. So just take my word for it. It is very messed up and very scary. And it had me in chills and tears by the end of reading it. But Haley, thank you so much for sending over your story. I'm so sorry that you and your wife have been going through that. And if you have any updates in the future, please let me know, because I'm sure myself and everybody else would love to know how you guys are doing. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them. You can email me at the email on the screen or the email in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for being here. I love you. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.